after Hitler committed suicide in the bunker underneath Berlin, which had been reduced to rubble by that time, the war actually went on for a few more days. It was left to an admiral, Admiral Donitz, to surrender to the Allies, and there's a lot of craziness in sort of how that came about. But we're now going to backtrack and cover, sadly, since it's the last thing we do in the class, the most difficult to talk about feature of World War II, and that's a look at the Holocaust. This is Germany's descent into barbarism. It's hard to put words to the enormous inhumanity of this whole episode in world history, and it still seems inexplicable to this day. This could have happened. There are many pictures like this, but a poor Jewish man on the ground with German soldiers, even kids, it appears. One looks like a child laughing and getting great pleasure out of this person's pain. The geography of the Holocaust is worth stopping on for a moment. Most importantly, for our purposes here, I direct your attention to the part of the map with the light green on the right side of the map, and the part of that that sort of juts out furthest to the west, where you see Warsaw and Lodz, because the death camps or death factories were, all of them were in occupied Poland after the Germans had gone in and subdued Poland by force. Now they occupied it, and the infamous death camps were here. So Belzec, Sobibor, etc. Auschwitz was there as well. There were concentration camps in other places, but those weren't death camps. Not that people weren't treated terribly and were slated to die in concentration camps, but the concentration camps were work camps where the Nazis got as much work out of prisoners as possible, but didn't care if they died, and in fact preferred them to die. So concentration camps in many ways were almost as vicious, and it was part of the intentional destruction of European Jewry, but they weren't death factories in the same way that the 6 camps like Auschwitz, the most well-known, which were just death factories. Actually, Auschwitz had a separate complex, so it was both death factory and work camp as well. So 2 different ways to kill Jews there. The rest of this map I don't think we need to deal with. That's the most important thing to remember. The German goal from the beginning, or one of the major goals anyway, was the destruction of the Soviet Union entirely. Part of Hitler's sort of imperial designs, we talked about European empire by looking at this very map earlier, was to resettle Germans in the East. So part of this Lebensraum idea meant not only taking down the Soviet Union, but replacing Russian citizens and farmers and workers with German ones, which was utterly insane. There weren't even enough Germans, not enough Germans who wanted to go, or just enough Germans, period, to fill up all that territory. Nonetheless, logic and facts and numbers didn't stop the Nazis from attempting this anyway. But when that goal did come up short, the primary Nazi goal became the destruction of European Jews, which historians disagree still on whether or not the intention of Hitler and the Nazis from the beginning was to, from the beginning of their movement, was to exterminate, eliminate all Jews in Europe, or if that came about only through the war itself, sort of came about gradually. Either way, it ended up being, arguably, I think, unarguably, the greatest act of genocide in world history, at least the most atrocious one. But there is a debate about this today. One of the scariest things to contemplate when looking at, thinking about, talking about the Holocaust is the question of responsibility. Who is responsible? Who's to blame for about 11 million people killed in roughly 3 years, all of them executed? That's not talking about any battlefield casualties. That's just the innocent civilians killed in the Holocaust, the final solution, as the Germans called it. About half of that 11 million were Jews, but the Nazis threw in a lot of other groups that they thought were not fit to live: Jehovah's Witnesses, gypsies, homosexuals, etc., etc. But by far the largest group that came under this kind of attack and persecution were the Jews. One Harvard scholar years ago wrote a book, which you see in the upper left, called Hitler's Willing Executioners. And in that book, it was sort of a pioneering book, still kind of a standard text, but he talked about something he referred to as eliminationist, German eliminationist anti-Semitism. And his contention was that though there was anti-Semitism throughout Europe, that Germany had for a long time a more virulent strain of anti-Semitism, and that's why the Holocaust happened where it did in Germany. Other scholars have disagreed with this point, including the guy whose book you see at the bottom right, Christopher Browning's Ordinary Men, Reserve Police Battalion 101, and the Final Solution in Poland. Browning actually, as an historian, found something that doesn't happen that often. He found a gold mine of primary source documents, records that he didn't, nobody knew were there before, at least no historians, and used them to put together this book. What had happened is that Germany, after World War II, when it became a democratic republic, partly to atone for what its country had done just years prior, to kind of try to put it behind them, they held some of their own trials. The Nuremberg trials are famous, done by the Allies. But the German government itself, as a democracy after the war, put some former Nazis on trial for war crimes as well. And Reserve Police Battalion 101, at least its officers, those that survived, or many of its officers, were brought to trial in Germany, and all or almost all of the surviving members of the battalion, Reserve Police Battalion 101, were called to testify about their experiences as part of this criminal trial. So there's just reams of documents and records, interviews with these witnesses who were soldiers in that battalion. And Police Battalion 101 wasn't a frontline unit. Their job was to go in after the frontline troops had gone through, in this case, Poland, and kind of be the occupying force, or one of the occupying forces. It wasn't just one battalion, of course. And so there were other units that did this kind of thing as well. But one of their main jobs was to go into Polish towns and villages, one after the other, day after day, and round up Jews. They put them in trucks, would drive them out into the countryside, take them out of the truck into the forest, with sort of one soldier behind each person, including men, women, children, old people, have them kneel down kind of in a line, each Jewish person having a gun pointed from behind at their neck, and shot. And they'd go back to the truck, get another group out, do the same thing. and trucks going back and forth, sometimes all day long, until they killed every Jew in an entire town, and then went to the next one, later that day or the next day. An absolutely heinous business, to put it mildly. But what Browning found here, he's not the only person to do this, the only historian to conclude this, was that this wasn't so much about anti-Semitism. Certainly, it was driven by that. Hitler and Himmler, the top Nazi brass, and there were certainly members of these military units who were anti-Semites. But Browning says it's scarier than that. A lot of these guys were ordinary people with ordinary psychological profiles and didn't necessarily hate Jews, weren't anti-Semites. And he talks about all kinds of social pressures, normal social pressures that lead to abnormal outcomes like mass criminality and mass murder, which is what happened here on a gigantic scale. In his book, he refers to a couple of the most famous experiments in social psychology. You see the Milgram experiment here. That's one of them. Another is the Zimbardo experiment done at Stanford around the same time. Both of them were done in part to try to understand how ordinary people can commit crimes like those committed in the Holocaust. Stanley Milgram at Yale was the son of parents, both of whom survived Auschwitz. So there's no doubt that Milgram was doing this experiment to deal with this question right here about how do human beings that are normal commit such terrible atrocities and crimes. There were many conclusions on this, but one of which is when people believe that they're not responsible, that someone else, someone above them is responsible, they're more likely to commit the crime. So the experimenters in the Milgram experiment found this to be the case. I won't go into the details of the Milgram experiment. It is quite interesting and worth looking up. But suffice it to say that it did show that average people, normal people, are capable of doing really, really vicious things, extremely cruel things to other people. 2/3 of those volunteered for the experiment went to the most extreme length possible to inflict pain on someone else. They didn't know that they weren't actually inflicting pain on them. So there was actors faking pain, but they didn't know that. So they were willing, under the orders of the scientist or person in charge in the lab, willing to go all the way to the most extreme possible physical punishment as part of the test. 2/3, which means that if we were in the classroom right now and everyone would be thinking, I'd never do that, you'd be wrong, because this experiment was done many, many times. I mean, hundreds of times, and all over the country, and eventually all over the world, and it basically came out the same almost every time. Roughly 2/3 of those that volunteered who had normal psychological profiles went all the way to the end of inflicting the most largest possible pain on the other person. So that would mean in our class, 2/3 of us, I don't think any of us can know who it would be. We all want to think it wouldn't be us, but I think we're fooling ourselves possibly because it was 2/3 again and again and again. So this makes the Holocaust, in a way, even scarier, adds another dimension to it. It wasn't just anti-Semites, taking out their anger towards them, this way, this massive violence. It also appears to have been normal people caught up in this and giving into psychological, socio-psychological pressures, like following orders, etc. Sometimes also talked about in Professor Browning's book that some of the soldiers went along because they didn't want to be singled out by the other soldiers as getting away with not doing something. Also, I know I'm belaboring this, but Also, it was found in this book and others that have followed that unlike what I think most people previously were taught to believe about the Holocaust, that German soldiers that weren't anti-Semites committed these crimes because they were terrified that if they didn't, they'd get arrested and shot by their Nazi superiors or officers themselves. That actually wasn't true. This book documents that in this battalion, anyway, there were a number of soldiers in the battalion that just refused to do this on principle and based on moral grounds, and they'd just be told, okay, go guard the trucks, and they wouldn't be punished for it, because there were plenty of people in the battalion that were willing to do it, however reluctantly or however energetically. But those that didn't, they didn't get punished by their superiors, but they sometimes got ostracized by their fellow soldiers, some of whom took the viewpoint like, wait a minute, I don't want to do this either, but I have to, and how are you getting out of it? How's that fair? Right? So this is much more complicated than maybe you even thought. The German official, Nazi official, technically in charge of everything that happened in the Holocaust was Heinrich Himmler. I haven't really talked about him yet. One of the top-ranking Nazis and the head of the feared and brutal SS. So he was sort of top at the chain of the command in the Holocaust. Below him was another scary individual, not as famous today, Reinhard Heydrich, who really was kind of put in control of the Holocaust in terms of everyday execution of the Holocaust, pardon the pun. So he was kind of the hands-on leader, but he did report back to Himmler and to Hitler. So Heydrich was given enormous authority, which must have come from Hitler, not just Himmler, to conduct and put into play the final solution, the annihilation of European Jewry. He presided at the now famous Wannsee Conference, which we'll get to, but a crucial figure, at least until he was killed in this whole horrific scene. The Wannsee Conference happened in January of 1942. Wannsee was an outskirt of Berlin, the capital. At the bottom you see a photograph. That's Kenneth Branagh and Stanley Tucci, who play Heydrich and Adolph Eichmann, respectively, in a great movie, and I'm blanking on the title of it right now, but about this meeting. So the Wannsee Conference happens at the beginning of 1942. This kind of organized the Holocaust and established and let everybody know in one department or another of the government and military that it's Heydrich that has the go-ahead to be the one guy in charge of carrying out the final solution. Thomas Childers, who I've quoted before, wrote an excellent recent book called The Third Reich, said they were there at the invitation of Reinhard Heydrich, head of the Reich Security Main Office, an SS officer, to discuss developments in Nazi Jewish policy. From the beginning, it was clear that the meeting had two purposes. First, Heydrich would unveil for the first time his plan for the final solution to the Jewish question, and second, he would assert ultimate authority over it. The plan was to be executed by the SS, and the various party and state agencies represented there at the meeting were to pledge their readiness to cooperate in full with its demands. Some grousing around the table took place, but was quickly silenced by Heydrich's smooth but intimidating demeanor. So this is captured well in this movie that you see at the bottom. Maybe I'll think of it before we finish here. But they go around the room sort of soliciting the ideas of some of the other attendees, leaders, or deputy leaders from certain important government departments and military departments, and it gives off sort of the appearance to most of them there that that Heydrich is soliciting advice and wanting them to kind of be in on what's going on. But it becomes quickly clear to most of them. Some of them take a little longer to figure it out around the table, that Heydrich doesn't really care. He's making it sound nice, but that he's really just basically saying, we're here to let you know that I'm in charge. I say what happens, and you're going to follow or else. This was extremely hardcore. All records of the Wannsee Conference were supposed to be destroyed, but a few of them survived. A few of the documents survived. One of them you see here on the right. After Heydrich was assassinated by Czech partisans, and he was assassinated. This was a daring plot, a cell of basically terrorists that were sent in to kill Heydrich, who did so and lost their lives in the process or after the fact. But nonetheless, Heydrich was out of the way. His assistant, Adolph Eichmann, then stepped in and basically took his job, and from that point, then he was in charge of the day-to-day operations and carrying out of the Holocaust under SS head Himmler, and of course Hitler's overall plan. Adolf Eichmann was a cold, sort of calculating individual. He claimed he didn't have any hatred towards Jews at all, but he was proud of doing his job. Eichmann was one of the top Nazis. Maybe some of you already know this. There have been a couple good movies about this. One came out last year. I forget the name of that one too. I did see it because it's a fantastic story, true story. One of the top Nazis to get away and not be captured by the Allied authorities, and he ended up living in Argentina for a number of years. But the Israeli Mossad, Israel's intelligence force, which is known to be quite good, it is quite good, they actually sent a team in. They found out where Eichmann was living under an assumed name, and without telling the government of Argentina, actually kidnapped him and spirited him out back to Israel to face trial for war crimes and crimes against humanity, and tried him in Israel, found him guilty, and had him executed. One of the most incredible stories, single stories, individual stories of the whole Holocaust and World War II. Something I think that should always be thrown into the mix, understanding the Holocaust, is its grim efficiency. Part of the reason that so many millions were able to be killed in the concentration camps and death factories in a fairly short amount of time, into the millions, is because this was organized extremely well. Well documented. Train schedules were so precise that load after load of Jewish prisoners could be dropped off at a place like Auschwitz or Treblinka, and just as sort of they sort of get processed with, again, air quotation marks, another train is coming in. And the bureaucracy then was well heeled and well organized in the Holocaust. Also, they used technology. They bought IBM technology, and there's been a lot of questions about IBM's role in all of this. Since IBM had a subsidiary company in Germany, so IBM knew what was going on. They were selling to the German Nazi government were known as Hollerith machines. Heinrich Himmler was a German immigrant to the United States long before World War II, who invented a machine that basically sorted information quickly. You may have seen one or more of these somewhere in a warehouse somewhere collecting dust, but they're usually pretty big, and they're punch card machines. So there's these kind of like long rectangular shaped cards, usually kind of tan cards, and they have holes punched in them. And depending on the pattern of holes, the machine knows to sort all of those with that same pattern of holes into this bin, and those with a different type of holes in that bin, and those with another type of configuration in the following bin. So it was a precursor to the computer, and did organize information much faster than anything came before it. Hollerith had sold it off, and it ended up being in the hands of Watson, the leader of IBM, and the Nazis knew about this and ordered and received lots of Hollerith machines and thousands, I don't know, maybe millions of punch cards. So there's some question about IBM's complicity in the Holocaust. In fact, another very good book written by a journalist, Edwin Black, called IBM and the Holocaust, written about 15 years ago, goes into this in great detail, and he has a lot of things to say critically about IBM and other American corporations and their role in making profits during World War II in what appear to be less than respectable ways. In the first part of the Holocaust, the Holocaust was done in a much messier fashion, even than the death camps, which I guess is, messy and horrible enough. But as German troops went into the Soviet Union, there was a large concentration of Jews in the Soviet Union as well as Poland. The Jews were often just shot. We talked about Police Battalion 101, but they were just one of many groups. In fact, there were units that specialized in executing these kind of helpless, abductees or prisoners, called the Einsatzgruppen, or order police. And these pictures are difficult to watch, but I do believe we need to see what actually happened here. There's a tendency to forget about this all too often, increasingly not believe that it happened, which is terrifying. It happened, and it's one of the greatest crimes in history. But about half of the Jews killed in the Holocaust, this isn't very well known, were killed in this way, not in the death camps. That's because at this point, this was earlier in the war, the death camps weren't ready yet. They hadn't built them yet. So after they were built and figured out how it was done, then they went into operation, and this more or less stopped. So about half of European Jews killed in the Holocaust were killed by these extremely inhumane, barbarous methods. As far as the statistics of the Holocaust are concerned, you can kind of read much of this yourself. At Auschwitz, the most famous or infamous camp, or death factory, as one scholar insists that we call it, about 1,200,000 Polish Jews killed, about 700,000 European Jews, West European Jews killed, and about 400,000 Hungarian Jews gassed. For whatever reason, Hungary was one of the last places that the Nazis went in to try to gather Jews and force them into trains and send them to death camps to be gassed. I didn't say this before. I assumed you already knew, but I should say it. Right, the death camps meant that Jews from that point forward were sent to such camps and sent into showers, told they were going into showers with the door locked behind them, and a whole mass of them, one group at a time, gassed as gas would be let out from above. They're locked into the room. It took minutes to a half an hour for everyone to die in utter agony, and they did it again and again and again to the point of millions dying this way. Zyklone B, cyanide, was one of the forms of gas used here, which hits the body at the cellular level. So Hungary, back to my original point, was one of the last places in Europe with a concentration of Jews that the Nazis rounded up, and most of them were sent to Auschwitz. the rest of that, again, you can read. I was kind of looking down to see what else you might need to know. A scary individual, not well known, but one of the leaders most responsible for all of this hideous death and destruction is a guy named Odilo Globocnik, who wasn't even German, but he became a high-ranking Nazi official and had a lot to do with the operation of the death factories, 6 of them: Chelmno, Belzec, Sobibor, Treblinka, Majdanek, and the most famous Auschwitz. Timothy Snyder, a well-known now and a guy who's sort of seen on TV some because of his concern about our present government situation, which is frightening since he's an expert on the Holocaust and Nazism in World War II. He said Belzec was not to be a camp. People spend the night at camps. Belzec was to be a death factory where Jews would be killed upon arrival. It's Snyder that insists that everyone call these things not death camps but death factories, because in many of them, all except for Auschwitz, they didn't even have places to sleep. Jews were just brought in by train, taken off the train, guided into the gas chambers that they were told were showers, killed, dragged out by a handful of inmates that were allowed to live for a while, and the next group would be brought in after the showers were scrubbed clean of everything that I won't even mention that was sort of inside the showers, gas chambers after the deed was done. And there were usually incinerators too, where the bodies were not just dumped like you see at the bottom, but were burned to ashes. Again, extremely difficult to look at this stuff, talk about it. Unfortunately, I've read all too much about it. It's part of the job. By the way, the quote from Snyder mentions Belzec because it was the first one to be a death factory. The others to follow, but Auschwitz was different because it was kind of a hybrid. It was a concentration camp, a work camp, and a death factory. You've seen this in movies, possibly. It comes up in a number of movies about the Holocaust. But at Auschwitz, Jews, little to their knowledge, when they got off the train, they'd have to be in a line, and they'd get up to the front with SS officers there who would ask them some questions and look at their physical fitness, and would then direct them either to go right or left. What they didn't know was that was their life right there. If they were directed in one direction, that meant, okay, you're fit enough to do some work, at least for a while before you die. But some of them didn't die in the end. Some of them lived, but most of them did. But if you were sent the other direction, you were sent straight to the showers/gas chambers and killed. So right at that moment, maybe I'm sure some Jews had some inkling, if not more, what was about to happen, what was being done at those kind of that moment of decision. But most of them did not. They may have feared it. There were rumors going around Jewish communities in Eastern Europe at this time and before that this kind of thing was happening, but some of them didn't believe it, possibly because they didn't want to believe it, which I can understand. Operation Reinhardt was pure revenge for the killing of Reinhard Heydrich by partisans in Eastern Europe. It led to the gassing of 1.3 million Polish Jews, who probably would have been gassed anyway in 1942 alone. 800,000 Jews, almost all from Warsaw, were gassed at Treblinka, one of the worst of the death camps. In fact, you see the disgusting picture below, which actually happened because the person, the German official that was in charge of Treblinka, was so unorganized, maybe even so overwhelmed by the number of people that he was, gassing, that he had them lined up and stacked outside, and where Jews coming in on trains could see, which wasn't something the Germans or Nazis wanted. But at Treblinka it happened for a while until the I forget the officer's name, was fired, and a more efficient person came in. More efficient, of course, in carrying out mass murder. Auschwitz was, in many ways, the climax of the Holocaust. Again, I apologize for the pictures, but this is something I do think we have to know as educated people in the world. So, work or death. Right. This on the right is a picture of that moment where one officer or two would decide your fate without you probably knowing it. The type of gases you see here, the numbers, again, you can work out for yourselves. Okay, that does it. So this brings us to the very end. I hope everybody enjoys their vacation. Take care.